It's our Friday edition of Locked On Blue Devils here today, Friday, July 8th, 2022. The summer is flying by. We're getting set for the upcoming year of college athletics. Duke men's basketball always in the headlines, and we want to talk off-season, some storylines to discuss with Brendan Marks of The Athletic as we get set for the upcoming season. Conference realignment is a big topic of conversation as well. So we do all of that on today's edition of Locked On Blue Devils. Let's get to it.
Dick Vitale, hey, make sure you listen, man, to Locked On Blue Devils with JJ Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. It's so great to have you here with us on today's show. It's Friday, July 8th, 2022, and we've got a lot to discuss in the world of Duke athletics. Today's episode is brought to you by our partners over at BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Be sure to follow the show on Twitter at LO_Blue Devils. I am on Twitter at _JJ_Jackson_. If you would, follow and subscribe for free wherever you get your podcast. Leave us a 5-star rating and written review. That means a lot when you take the time to do that. We're on YouTube each and every day, so be sure to follow and subscribe over there. Share this video with your friends as we continue to grow in the video space. Proud to be a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As we get set for today's show, let me welcome in a good pal, Brendan Marks of The Athletic. It's been 5 or 6 weeks since we've got a chance to see Brendan on the program, to hear from him. And Brendan, the time is always greatly appreciated. I hope your summer is going well, my friend.
Yes, absolutely. I can't complain. I got to say, by the way, you've got one of the best intro music segments of any podcast that I've been on. I hope that you have that on recorder and could just play it anytime you walk in a room, because it's pretty cool.
When Dickie V tells you that you're awesome, baby, it can only lift the spirits. Like, that's the only thing that can happen. And so, no, it's a cool thing to be able to go to. That's for sure. So we talk about everything going on right now in the world of college athletics, and conference realignment is such a real topic of conversation. It was this time last year that with my radio show, with my career, I was at SEC football media days when the news broke that Oklahoma and Texas was going to be joining the SEC, and literally feet away from the commissioner, Greg Sankey, of the Southeastern Conference, as this news is starting to break. And you wind forward 365 days, and within the past week, we've seen the USC and UCLA news. I mean, a lot of things are taking place. Tell me where you're at on all this change in college athletics.
Yeah, I think that, especially with the news of UCLA and USC going to the Big Ten, at this point, we are, if we're not already there, we're very rapidly moving into the era of super conferences. And, but by far, we are not settled with where everything is going to end up. I think that, if you are one of the other conferences left standing, if you're the ACC, if you're the Pac-12, if you're the Big 12, especially the Pac-12, I mean, you've already been rated, but you're trying to figure out, okay, how do we make ourselves viable in the long term? How do we survive? I mean, I know it sounds dramatic and people will think, oh, there's no way that, conferences like the ACC are just not going to exist anymore. But that is the reality of the situation that's facing them. And so I'll be fascinated to see where everybody shakes up. I think we could still have some more movement, in the next couple of weeks here. I would expect that to be the case. But things are far from settled. And where they ultimately end up, I think, is with, a lot of haves and unfortunately a lot more have-nots.
I know this is major reporting that's taking place, and you got to look at TV deals that move the needle. And football is such a large revenue generating sport. But at a school like Duke, at a school like North Carolina that you covered, there's so much love and support for the basketball programs. A lot of finances go into that. When you look at a school like Duke, why are they so interesting in all of this?
Yeah, I think that Duke is probably, along with like a Kansas, would be one of the more interesting schools out there, just because you do have on its face a top 3 basketball brand. And let's not forget that in the grand scheme of things here, when we're talking about television contracts and we're talking about revenue being distributed, it's all about the brands. You don't necessarily have to have the on-field production or on-court production in the case of basketball to justify being included in one of these conferences. You've heard a lot about North Carolina, for example, which has not had a lot of success recently in football, is consistently winning, anywhere from 5 to 8 games. And yet, because of the national scope of that brand, they're seen as being more attractive than maybe their on-field results would suggest. Duke is an interesting case because with basketball, you do have that top 3 brand. And as we have seen with Duke television, Duke basketball, I'm talking about here, as we've seen with Duke's TV numbers the last couple of seasons, whenever Duke basketball is on TV, people are watching. I mean, Duke basketball, in terms of college basketball games, they're some of the best inventory out there. So, but then again, you have to look at the football side of things, where is Duke bringing that same value where the revenue distribution they would be receiving from potentially joining one of these super conferences, is that commensurate to the value that they're bringing to that conference? And it's probably not at this point. Duke and Nina King, especially since she's taken over as AD, is making investments in football, but the brand is not there by any means. The on-field product certainly is not there. And so you're looking at sort of a program that, okay, on one side does offer you this elite basketball inventory. And especially if this were to be a partnership move where Duke and North Carolina are going together, you're getting that rivalry, and that rivalry's TV inventory is incredibly, incredibly valuable. But at the same time, the football piece of it has to make sense first. And that, I think, is what's hard for a lot of ACC stalwarts to get their heads around. They're so used to, even as late as the 90s, basketball being king. It's just not the case anymore. I mean, the revenue in football is simply 3 times as much as it is in basketball.
We'll obviously see how all this plays out, and a lot of big-time decision makers have to make decisions. So many things are at play here. I know that they're student athletes at the end of the day, and so in some cases, academics want to become a thing for some people. I was on a radio show recently and asked why Vanderbilt and Duke weren't more similar, given that those schools have the academic rigors that they have. But for me, it was pretty plain and simple that when you look at revenue generating sports, football is king, basketball's right behind it, and Duke holds its own and almost carries the flag for the sport of college basketball. Yes, Vanderbilt has 2 or 3 national championships in baseball over the past few years, and they're doing really good things on the baseball diamond, but to me, they just don't move the needle in any other regards over there. They've got a great setup in the SEC, and I never thought I would bring up Vanderbilt in a conversation with you, Brendan. But here we are. I mean, you're trying to find similar schools to Duke, and academically in the Southeast, where we're kind of all located, Vanderbilt could, in a way, be one of the most similar schools to where the Blue Devils are.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think, as crazy as it sounds, and some of what I'm about to say is why we're in the current predicament that we're in, where leagues are worried about potentially faltering and they're worried about being poached from. It's just a matter of where you are right now. It's just about the current composition of these leagues. And so Vanderbilt, by getting on the current SEC media rights deal, it just happens to be in a great spot. Whereas Duke, unfortunately, is tied to the ACC's grant of rights, which goes through 2036. And that is essentially the only thing that is keeping the ACC together right now. And I would assume, and from what I have heard, it sounds like the potential of the ACC's grant of rights being challenged in court as not being a valid contract, especially when you consider that the ACC is based in North Carolina. 4 of its charter members are based in North Carolina. The case would probably be seen in the state of North Carolina in a North Carolina court. Well, now you're talking about, okay, you've got a North Carolina court and you've got a North Carolina state legislature. Would they want to see, different universities within there be able to go out and receive, in the case of going to the Big Ten, it's reported $100+ million annual revenue distribution. I mean, you're talking about, based on what the ACC got this year, about $36 million, a $64+ million difference. You would assume that the state it's crazy. I mean, the money is crazy, but you would assume the state legislature would want the universities within its border to go out and to be able to receive as much revenue as possible, because that's obviously only going to boost their standing athletically, and it's the trickle-down effect from where that money goes. So Duke, to me, is really probably as fascinating a case as there is in this whole conference realignment picture, because the disparity is so stark between basketball and football. But we talk about football being the revenue king. if you're a conference like the Big Ten, for example, and you have the football that you already have right now, but you're also going to add in the Duke North Carolina basketball rivalry. I mean, that sounds like a pretty good deal to me. That sounds like something where even though the football might not be there now, the investments are being made. You are taking a bit of a gamble, but at that point, you're providing yourself television inventory basically for the whole year, and that's something that the networks are going to be attracted to.
People are still going to watch basketball, even if it's just you and me. Now, I know a lot of people are always going to still be watching basketball. It's going to be awesome to I want answers for a lot of this. I think everybody does. You want to know now what it's going to look like, and to not have all these things up in the air, the limit. The last 2 or 3 years, it's funny, we've been talking, not on this show, but in the ACC, there's been conversations about relocating the headquarters from Greensboro and going to other places. And like you're saying, this is really real, that you need to make sure you have a conference first before you start to worry about some of those other things in place. And I don't think we saw ourselves getting to this point.
Unfortunately not. And I think, you look at the grant of rights in itself being extended in 2016 in conjunction with the start of the ACC network and that being rolled out. That is really the burden that has come back to bear. The fact that has been extended in such a long time out. The reason why you're able to see teams like Oklahoma and Texas and USC and UCLA jump when they are in the next, 3 years essentially is because their respective conferences' grant of rights are up. So that makes those moves viable. The ACC in that respect is sort of in a little bit of a bind. Obviously, it wants to keep all of its schools in so that it can endure as a conference. But at the same point, if you're not letting any of those schools out, conference realignment is not going to sit here and wait for you. The rest of this is going to shape out, and the ACC is only going to fall further and further behind. You just wonder if it gets to the point where it's not financially feasible or viable for the ACC to continue operating as it currently is. And then at that point, it would just be a free-for-all and who's trying to get it. Who's getting pulled up and who's getting pulled down?
Well, let's go ahead and let's talk basketball. Let's kind of shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about the actual product on the floor that, again, we'll be viewing and will be important for folks to invest in and that sort of thing. We'll do that in just a moment here on today's edition of Locked On Blue Devils. Our show today is brought to you by our good pals over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports information. You can find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL playoffs and Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all of the sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And it's the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. Bet online, where the game starts. As we welcome you back into today's edition of Locked On Blue Devils, JJ Jackson alongside Brendan Marks of The Athletic. Brendan, the last time we spoke, we were kind of going through the pre-draft process for Duke basketball, what the roster could look like, and we saw 5 Duke Blue Devils hear their name called. 4 in the first round, including Paolo Banchero going number 1 overall, and then 5 total players being drafted. It ended the Coach K era of draft picks, and he set records that, quite frankly, I don't know how anybody's going to be able to beat over a coaching career or that sort of thing. But, man, it was pretty special to see those guys see their NBA dreams come true from the Blue Devils this past year.
Yeah, for sure. And, just having gotten to know them over the course of the year and even in the years leading up to when they get to Duke, in the recruiting circuit and when they're committing and things, it's just really cool to see those guys get to that point. And, I don't mind sharing just a little personal story here. I texted with Paolo Banchero's parents after he was drafted. I just sent him a congratulatory note, I'm saying, wishing you guys nothing but the best or whatever. And it took probably 3 or 4 days for them to get back to me. And the only thing they said was, and we've talked more since, but it's been a week. So it's just really cool to see those guys who have dreamed about getting to this point finally get there. For someone like Wendell Moore, who came in and had some struggles, seeing them finally become a first-round pick and be validated like that, it's just a very cool story. And again, it's confirmation of why people go to Duke, right? Like, the night of the NBA draft is as good a night for Duke's brand as there is out there. It's the reason why Jon Scheyer's already got, the number 1 class coming in this year. It's the reason he's so far ahead for the number 1 class next year. And as long as Duke continues to have that sort of standing on draft night, they're going to continue to bring in the players they do, the talent they do, and continue to have a chance to compete for titles.
I know there were probably several eye rolls when all of a sudden Paulo goes number one and you're watching the broadcast and Coach K has a personal message. And there's probably only one coach in America that gets the opportunity to do something like that. But it was so special to see those guys, like you're saying, get drafted. A lot about Trevor Keels and his decision whether to stay or go. And there was certainly a lot of good reporting out there post-combine. I'm thinking particularly about the story you had at The Athletic, which was just so supreme in so many ways. And unfortunately for Trevor, Duke was not able to have 5 first-round picks. He did fall to the second round, but is going to go to the New York Knicks, where he's going to see a pair of former Blue Devils and R.J. Barrett and Cam Reddish. And even Trevor Keels got to hear his name called.
Yeah, and I think Trevor has an opportunity here. I think you mentioned the combine. He did not test well athletically at the combine. Was not in terms of measurables at the front of the leaderboard in any respect. People wanted to see him lose a weight, wanted to see him in better shape, wanted to see him run and test a little bit better. But at the end of the day, this is a guy who's one of the youngest players in the draft. And the Knicks are getting somebody who has proven in Madison Square Garden, no less, that he can take over a game against future pros. And so I think for Trevor, the steps to success at the next level are obviously getting his body right, making sure that he's maintaining that bigger, bulkier frame that enables him to play the tough on-ball defense he does without losing any of the quickness that he needs on some of those straight line drives to the basket. I think also, obviously the three-point shot, mechanically it looks good. There might be a little bit of over-rotation there, but I think, if he can iron that out and if he really commits to being, sort of a 3-and-D guy, there's a role for him here. And I know that folks in New York are excited about him. I know they were excited to get him where they did. And again, for somebody who's as young as he is, there's still a lot of upside. There's still a lot of projecting to do in terms of growth. So obviously, I know Duke would have loved to have had him go in the first round. He would have loved it too, but the opportunity is certainly there for him to grab. And, and everybody in this era of basketball, especially at the NBA level, they need shot makers, they need defenders. He can do both those things when he's at his best.
Brendan, here we are. It's our Friday, July 8th episode of Locked On Blue Devils. So we've crossed the 2-week plateau for when the draft happened 2 weeks ago. And it's just now today in this moment that you allowed me to think about the fact that Trevor Keels' best performance was in Madison Square Garden. As I'm doing entire lead up to the draft, if you want to turn on any game for Trevor Keels, it's against Kentucky to start the year. And it was just now that it clicked for me that I was like, wait a minute. Yeah, that's where the Knicks play.
Right, exactly. So, listen, I went back and I watched that game so many times in the pre-draft process and had scouts calling and asking about that game. He was sensational. I mean, sensational. He played bully ball. And I wonder so much about this. When a player has a performance like that in the first game of the season, how it changes expectations. I think going into last year, everybody knew that Paolo Banchero was going to be the guy. They knew AJ Griffin, because of the injury, was going to need a little bit of time. You figure Wendell Moore was going to take some strides as a junior. Keels was sort of the unknown. And the staff, raved about him over the summer, but you don't really get to see it until that first game. So him performing the way he did created these sky-high expectations the rest of the season that I don't know that he met consistently, certainly did in flashes, but I'm always curious about if guys maybe don't have that incredible performance week one, if we give them a little more leeway or grace the rest of the season. But no, it's not a bad thing that the guy had his best performance of his college career where he's going to be now playing professionally.
No doubt about that. Well, let's start to turn our attention to next year's team that's likely to have a couple of guys who in 1 year's time will hear their name called on draft night, and we'll kind of set up Jon Scheyer's first year as the head coach of the Blue Devils in just one moment. I want to tell you about our friends over at LinkedIn. As the sun comes out and small businesses are back in business, LinkedIn Jobs make it easier to grow your team. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the people you want to interview faster and for free. You can create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Everybody has a LinkedIn profile. Add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word and your hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questionnaires make it easy to focus on the right candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you would like to interview and hire. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Final segment here today on our edition of Locked On Blue Devils. My name is JJ Jackson alongside Brendan Marks of The Athletic. Brendan, you recently had a very well-deserved week of vacation and some time off and able to kind of reset, refocus, re-energize for the upcoming year and what that could entail and unfold. We know football season is right around the corner. You've got a ton of focus on the college hoops world as well. Tell me a little bit about The Athletic and kind of what's going on in your world.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously conference realignment is at the start of everything we're trying to do right now. It is the number one story in college athletics right now. It's where's everybody going to end up? Because, for me, I'm a basketball guy first and foremost, and it's my passion and obviously what I spend the bulk of my time doing. But at the end of the day, basketball is sort of clinging along to the football ride at this point, just seeing where everybody turns up. So it'll be interesting to see. I do think that we're going to have more movement in the next couple of weeks here, so we'll be continuing to track that. And then for me, it's about starting to get into, okay, what are we hearing about what's happening with guys in summer workouts? What are we hearing about? This is the start of the busiest recruiting month of the year. Who's getting offers? Who's getting commitments? Who's doing that sort of thing? Obviously, Duke's in a really good place with his 2023 class already, but still have a few more room to add a couple of guys. 11 new faces to this year's roster. There's going to be a lot again next year. It's just sort of the way the beast works. But so trying to keep track of all those things. People always say that the summer is sort of a dead period, but at this point, given the way that college athletics is always moving and shaking, it's not. So we'll start to have more camp reports coming out. We'll hear what guys are doing. Some encouraging things, I think, out of Duke's, summer workouts already, especially as they relate to Jeremy Roach. And, we'll go from there.
The Athletic is worth every penny. I love reading it each and every day for your work, for here in the state of North Carolina. Let's give some love to Joe Person, and the Panthers have a new quarterback coming in, and Baker Mayfield. And just you can get all of that with just one subscription to know everything that there is to know about your favorite teams. And so I definitely want to talk about the summer right now for Duke Men's Hoops because the roster is now in place. You mentioned recruiting for 2023. The biggest shift in what the roster could look like this upcoming season was that Tyrese Proctor has reclassified and he's going to come into school a year earlier, which means, yes, you do have an opportunity to bring in another player to what was already the number one recruiting class in 2023. But tell me about Tyrese Proctor, Brendan, and why this is so significant.
Yeah, so, as I understand it, this is a move that was in the works even before Trevor Keels made his final NBA draft decision. I think Jon Scheyer looked at the rest of the state of his roster and said, okay, we need more backcourt depth. It's great that I'm getting Jeremy Roach back. Jalen Blakes was a really good developmental guy for us last year. He'll probably challenge for some backup minutes this year. But regardless of what Trevor Keels was going to do, there was a little bit of uncertainty at that other guard spot. And so in comes Tyrese Proctor. He's a guy who is already a little bit older for his class. If in theory, this is projecting ahead, but if he has a sensational freshman year, he should be eligible for the draft next year. So this is a guy who's coming in. He can really play both backcourt spots. He's a true combo. He's someone who is known for his 3-point shooting. Obviously he's coming out of the NBA Global Academy in Australia. They have a penchant and a pedigree for producing guys who are ready to contribute. So I think that this is a situation where you're talking about a guy who may not be an every single game starter for the Blue Devils, but he is at worst going to be a sixth man. I think that he and transfer Jacob Grandison, who I'm sure we'll talk about in a second, I think those two guys are sort of in that competition for the last starting spot, being the sixth man. I'd expect them both to see, 20, 25 minutes a game. They're both going to be huge pieces of what Duke does. But for Proctor especially, it's the defense, it's the basketball IQ, it's the 3-point shooting, and it's the versatility. It's somebody else in addition to Jalen Blakes and Jeremy Roach who's comfortable with the ball in his hands, initiating offense. As we saw last year with Duke, not really a true point guard. That'll be a little bit different this year just because of Jeremy Roach. His usage is going to be much higher. But you also have to factor in what does Jon Scheyer want to do offensively? How does he want to attack things? Is he going to do, is he going to run most of the same sets that Coach K did? Is he going to incorporate some new tendencies, some new play styles? And I think that when you're talking about a guy like Proctor, it just gives him the versatility to do a lot of different things. And also, if you can send one more guy to the draft next year, then, hey, that looks a little bit better for your first season.
Yes, it does. And to think about what Tyrese Proctor does on the floor, to think about the, as you said, the great playing experience that he's had already in his career, getting to come from Australia, now factor in is great. You mentioned it. You set yourself up. Jacob Grandison is sort of the last moving piece here. Started at Holy Cross, played 2 seasons at Illinois, an elite 3-point shooter in every percentage that you want to look at from this past season. Tell me about this move for Duke.
Yeah, this is, again, Jon Scheyer checking boxes. The two things that this Duke roster really didn't have, at least that you weren't sure about, were experience, which shouldn't be shocking because there was basically 2 players coming back, especially after Joey Baker's late entrance to the transfer portal. You were really looking at a young team without any experience. So Grandison fills that void. He turned 24. He's a grown man.
Yeah.
He turned 24 in April, I believe. So he's a guy who's played a lot of college basketball games, I think 124 in his career. And like you said, obviously the 3-point shooting is huge. Per Synergy, he was in the, I think top 15% nationally in terms of being a 3-point spot up shooter, especially from the corners. He's a plus 50% 3-point shooter in those areas. It's not hard to imagine him camping out in the corners and, Jeremy Roach driving and dishing to him. I don't think that he is coming in to be a star. I think that he knows that. I think he's coming in to be a role player. He's coming in to space the floor around Roach and the number of front court guys that Jon Scheyer brought in. To me, sort of a perfect role player. Gives you experience, sets the tone, gives you a lot of versatility defensively. He's 6'6", 210. So, it's not unfair to expect that he can switch 1 through 4. Just sort of is the ideal role player for what otherwise was going to be a really young team. So he's a guy that I know a lot of Illinois fans have reached out to me about and said, you're going to love this guy. So I think Duke fans got a pretty good get late in the portal season here.
It was pretty real for me because you said it was late in the portal season when Jacob Grandison makes the decision to come over. There was a lot of AJ Green conversation from Northern Iowa and where his next step could be. Malachi Smith, another top transfer that ultimately goes to Gonzaga. It was real when Grandison commits at the same time that the NBA Finals are taking place, and we're seeing a Duke star and Jason Tatum at 24 years old doing what he's doing on basketball's biggest stage. And Brendan, I'm sitting there like, wait a minute, Jacob Grandison is from the same high school class. Like, they're the same age, and it's 2 just completely different walks in their basketball life right now.
It's crazy. But and that's the thing, I think we have seen, especially the last couple of years in college basketball, like what Duke did last year in having the freshmen that it did play such a big role in Banchero and AJ Griffin, Trevor Keels. Like that's the exception to the rule. That's not the norm. We have seen more experienced teams winning. We saw Gonzaga and Baylor last year, championship game. You see North Carolina and Kansas. For Duke to get where it got with its relative lack of experience is pretty remarkable. So bringing in a guy like Grandison, again, it just sort of sets the tone for you. It's somebody who can teach you how to work. He's somebody who you're looking about a Dariq Whitehead, a Proctor. He's going to be able to show those guys, okay, here's how it works at this level. He's had success at a high major conference. I sort of look at him as being a little bit more impactful version of what Duke has in the front court with Ryan Young. A guy who has been there, who's going to fill that Theo John role, who's going to give you, 8 to 10 backup minutes a game, and who's really going to challenge you and get you better in practice. That's what Grandison's going to do. I just think he's going to offer a little bit more in the court just because of his 3-point value.
Brendan, always a joy to catch up with you and to talk all things Duke basketball and what's going on in the offseason. And again, continuing to read your work. We know that so much is shifting now in college athletics, and what a fun time it is. As we said, the start of the Mike Elko era this fall, and then Jon Scheyer quickly after that. Thank you once again for always being a friend to me and being on the show many times, and it's not going to be your last visit. So thanks again for the time today.
Absolutely. You don't have to thank me. I enjoy coming on. And I'm sure we're going to talk very, very soon. There's a lot to talk about.
Be well, Brendan. Thanks for the time here today.
You as well. Take care. Get some vacation, please.
Yes, I need that for sure. That's my pal Brendan Marks joining us on today's edition of Locked On Blue Devils. Thanks for watching. We'll be back on Monday with a brand new show for you. As always, go Duke. We'll talk to you on Monday. I'll see you then. Thank you and good day.